Welcome to our first Foolhardy festival.
And the women tuck their hair like they're trying to prove it won't fall out.
Is it time to release another easy listen?
Yeah, I just do cute comedy, that's what I do. I go,
Yeah, we have another show.
Now our apartment is...
the whole place is bigger. The people are bigger for sure. And no one knows what you're talking about if you ever could do in a job. This could be Rotterdam or anywhere. Liverpool or Rome. Because Rotterdam is anywhere. Anywhere alone.
And it's like, and is there any other...
Anywhere alone.
Thanks everyone for coming along. Please come along all and join us on the discovery of comedy. Cheers everyone.
To answer your question, comedy is subjective. You know, it's people hear it differently. They come to jokes or performances from different places. You know.
I was a busker on the streets of Waterford, which, let me tell you, on days like this and with the people that generally can go around and target the buskers of Waterford is a very, very tough trade. There is very skilled people that will rob you. And I am here tonight to teach you on how to rob buskers in Waterford. So what you need to do more so than anything is, if anyone was going up to rob a busker, their first thing to do is they just run up and grab all the money like this and turn around and run away. It's amateur stuff, lads. Amateur. It's sad to see. There's a skill to it. What you really want to be doing is you want to line yourself up on the road that you're going to be running across the busker. And then you're going to need to be getting your squats in because there's a deep one that you got to get in with a deep twist. You don't want to be pulling any muscles. We want to be looking after you doing this. You want to make sure it's right. And when you come up the road, you want to dip low with your right knee, get your right hand down, sweep up like this as quick as you can, push off and get down the road. That's how you're going to do it, okay? How I learned this technique was I watched a gentleman do it to me one day, and I knew he was a pro. I knew he'd done it for a long time, because what he done was he was up the top of the road and he was giving it this, and he had one of those bands out as well. I was like, this lad knows what he's fucking about, right? So I watched him coming, and I thought, he's not getting away with it. I'm going to stand up for myself. I was going to be proud of me and what I'd achieved and what I had earned as busking that day. So he came along, and I have to say, lads, his technique was almost Olympic in stance. It was absolutely fantastic. He got so deep with the lunge, it was unbelievable. But when he went down to grab the money, I grabbed his hand. I stopped him. I said, I'm going to say some cool fucking Clint Eastwood shit to him. And so I just leaned into him. I got as close as I could. And I goes, do I look like I came down in the last fucking shower? Which I tell you, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Wasn't as good as what he fucking said, though. Because while I had him like this, he looked me dead square in the eye. And then I could see he had those like dead shark eyes, like he'd murdered 4 people and already gotten away with it. And he just looked at me and goes, no, but you're about to feel like you fucking did. And he headbutted me straight in the face and broke my nose. What was amazing about it all was while that was happening, there was so many people walking past going, that looks like a terrible situation. I won't be getting involved in that.
How did I get into comedy? Poets made me do it.
I got into comedy out of blatant arrogance.
Well, I've always been fascinated by comedy from a very, very early age.
So the first time I actually started doing comedy though was like early 2019.
I've never done comedy out of drag, which is odd. So I did it first. It's because the first time I ever did it, the sound system wasn't working in the chapel we were in, and then it was the chapel in my college, and so you couldn't do a lip sync.
I guess I've always been interested in it. I used to watch Friday night comedies on TV with my mother every Friday. That was kind of a little ritual. So I just kind of got a love of it from that. And then as you get older, you get more comedy available to you. So I just always had love of it, yeah.
So I was a spoken word poet. I did a lot with mod words and I remember doing a horrifically dark poem one night and ending up like looking around at the faces and going, whoa, too far, and going immediately into a comedic one and then sort of riffing. And I kind of got the buzz, I kind of got the laughter bug, I guess.
I've always had this attitude in my life. I go and watch someone do something and think I can do a better job of that. When I was about 21, I went to a comedy gig and that just came straight into my head.
I just got this idea in my head that I'd like to try it. I don't do bucket lists or anything like that, and nobody ever told me I was funny. I wasn't a class clown. I was a little swatty little bollocks up the front, you know what I mean? So I was never the person making everybody laugh, but I just got this idea. I'd like to try it. So I told nobody, booked myself into an open mic in Dublin.
And then I was always my obsession, and and I suppose comedy was a way I used comedy in my everyday life from a very early age to mostly deflect from bullying and so on. Being a very small, skinny ginger child, you tend to draw bullies like moths to a flame.
It's a long-ish story, but very basically, since I was a child, I kind of like always loved telling stories. I've always loved attention. I was very early put on stage as a singer, since I could. My grandmother said, if you can speak, you can sing. So I was always on the stage, loved attention, and then there was one day, I was about maybe 15 or something, and I had bumped into an ex in town, and I told my dad the story of it, and the way that I told it, he said, you know what, you should be a comedian.
I was involved with the LGBT society in my college, and this is, there was some abuses going on in, I think, Tanzania. They were treating their kind of LGBT community really badly, and so the comedy society came to us and were like, do you guys want to do a gig to raise money for a Tanzanian kind of aid group, outreach group? And so we put together, the Comedy Society put together like a queer comedy night.
I consider myself a queen who does comedy more so because I have this idea like, oh, I'll paint my face up before I go on stage at all. And like, I actually would like to do, I was writing a normal 10 minutes, it wasn't like me pretending to be a character, and it was literally about the idea of the strain, because I'll do comedy nights and everyone else is like, you know, I'll be the only person in drag there for like no reason. It's the most unnecessary thing ever.
And so I like made some joke about being trans, and she was like, are you trans? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, come here to me. Have you ever thought about doing comedy? So I'm just trying to like kind of build the visibility in the empire. And I do consider myself funny. So, and that's why everyone who thinks they're gas wants to hear, right, you should do comedy.
I didn't start explicitly trying to do anything in particular. I just started trying to be funny and trying to figure out if it was something that was as enjoyable to do IRL as it was in my head.
Coronavirus this, Love Island that. It's incessant, like vuvuzelas of the mind. The Leo Varadkar boy knows well that a serum made from my ancient blood would eradicate all disease. However, he refuses to do the ritually required humiliation dance. And he will give me no virgins to sacrifice. He keeps all of the virgins for himself. Selfish. Day 600, 700,069 of my isolation. The gays are in mourning. I hear their cries from the back alleys, the saunas, the apartment buildings. Their pride parade was cancelled because of novel coronavirus. Take that, Leo Varadkar! It seems none of us will have any virgins to do with this day. The gays, in their selfishness, forget that it was Enya who gave them the first rainbow. It was red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunshine, green for...
No, absolutely. So, like, I think there's a very, like typical view of an old-fashioned comedian, which is usually a man. It's usually very, very kind of, like, laddie, sexual kind of humour. Kind of like the stuff that is funny when you've had it like 3 or 4 pints on you and you're out for a Friday night, and it's kind of like rough and ready jokes and slagging off and all that sort of thing. And that's like, that is great. It's not like there's a problem with that. But I do think back a while ago, that was very much what was on. Now it is a bit of what is on. And then there's, you know, people talking about you know, people talking about their mental health, people talking about, you've got a lot of queer acts talking about their identities, you've got people who are doing kind of stuff that's like got a little bit more of like clown work and like stranger stuff just on stage in front of you with a little bit more kind of artifice and things like that.
The scene has transformed, you know, like a lot of our culture has in the last few years, for the better. But yeah, back then, you know, it was pretty much very much dog eat dog. You know, very macho scene, mostly 99% male dominated. It was like literally one or two female comedians.
It was cutthroat. Do you know what I mean? No one would help anyone. No one gave advice. No one. People stood on each other's heads, basically.
That was it. You know, and there was like maybe I don't know 6, 7, 8 venues in Dublin, rotating the same comedians over and over again. They're all buddies, basically. And then eventually they would move to London.
But in the last 10 years, there's just been a total shift. People are supportive of each other. People want to see each other come along. People want to put each other over. Do you know what I mean?
The audience changes with that community spirit coming into it, and much more, again, LGBT friendly, like queer, not just in terms of sexuality and gender, but like in terms of what they're hungry for.
There's still definitely a bit of the lad who's getting up, who's telling his drinking stories, and there'll always be that, especially in Irish comedy. There'll always be those guys. But like now, especially at this festival where there's so many alt comedians and like trans comedians and queer comedians and like just people who you don't see on the main stages really, and they all have this unique perspective.
But no, I think in general, in terms of the scene at the moment, it's like people feel like they can build each other up, and it's, you know, it's the rising ship, the rising tide, that's it, lifts all boats. There we go, we got there in the end. I'm like, something about boats and tides and something.
I'm a dick pic solicitor. If that was a real job, there's no fucking way I'd be doing this, okay? I'd be like, blind America, dick pic solicitor at law, nice to meet you. In no way the kind of solicitor that my father ever dreamt about. But the problem is, Rob, that you ask for it once, they think that you want it all the time, okay? And that's not how it works, all right? So I'll give you an example. Thanks for asking, Rob. So it's 3 a.m., you want a dick pic, you ask for a dick pic, you get a dick pic, okay? You're like, that's cute, right? You have a little diddle. Oh, you gotta see it. Yeah. Everybody's happy. Then the next day, you're at work, 3 p.m., dick pic. What the fuck? Now, I hate to admit that there are grey areas, but this is a grey area, okay? Because, like, I didn't ask for that dick pic. But it is unsolicited work, Dick, and I like that. Thanks for taking the initiative, you got the job. Right, but then all of a sudden at 7 p.m. you're at the dinner table, full cum shot, Rob, what the fuck? Full cum shot with the stroking, and you know, it's a video, Rob, you know. I literally got a cum shot from a man while I was sat next to my father for a 3-course meal for Father's Day last year. What are you doing at 7 p.m. sending me a video of your dick? Call your dad! The thing is, Rob, okay, is that I suppose these lads, they don't have dads. Which makes them my type, okay?
I made a decision just to write jokes. That's it. Just one-liners, you know. And there wasn't that many comedians back in the mid-noughties. Most comedians in the mid-noughties, it was very heavy personal stuff and, you know, all that kind of thing. And I was like, you know, I think there might be a little gap in the market there for just one-liners, just jokes.
The first time I saw Eddie's art was huge for me. Just seeing someone just making stuff up, like not trying to tell stories about their own life, just creating nonsense out of thin air.
Like Laurel and Hardy, when I was growing up myself and my mum watching Laurel and Hardy.
I was obsessed with, you know, TV shows like Blackadder, The Fast Show, Seinfeld, you know.
It's not that I deliberately like observed Joanne McNally and was like, I'm going to do that. But I loved that dominance of the stage, and that was very important to me, to make sure that, like, when I get up, I'm moving the mic stand, I'm taking, this is me, this is mine.
Like Stuart Lee's whole thing of being like deconstructing that. I didn't realize comedians could make stuff up, or like if you're like you're telling a story, you have 5 minutes of something that about something that actually happened to you. You put a few lies in there to make it even spicier. I did not realize that until I was older.
I think stand-up comedy in its kind of purest form is your perspective, and using what you know and what you have to kind of create this unique view that brings in everyone with it, you know?
So I get a lot of my material, I talk a lot about being trans and being queer on stage, because those are big parts of my identity. I think they're really important parts of my life.
Like usually I do a bit of a character, like an exaggerated version of myself that is very like negative, very, very cranky, very wears his ego on his sleeve.
The way I describe it in a nutshell is it's about how I hate men but I love dick. And the trials and tribulations of that.
It's a whole thing about like, oh, the jester is the only person who can make fun of the king and all that kind of thing, where it's like a lot of the time you can say things in comedy that you wouldn't be able to say in like a speech or like a TED talk, unless it's a comedy TED talk. Or I think a lot of comedians, and it depends on the style and everything as well, but a lot of comedians, part of the art form is finding a way to say often like really difficult things to say, and doing it in a way that it's not going to make the audience uncomfortable, it's not going to kill the whole mood, and it's going to kind of rip the rug out afterwards, and they're going to be like, yeah, I can laugh at that.
And I think that's what will differentiate you from everybody else, is really kind of looking within yourself and seeing everyone is going to talk about this topic in the news, but what can I put on it to, one, make it funny, but two, create kind of an interesting point that it will latch on with people as well.
I'm on a speech course that's called the Maguire Program. It isn't a cure for stammering. What it is instead is a course, and it teaches you a series of techniques. And these techniques, they obviously aren't very effective. I tell you, I'm not a great advertisement for this fucking course. They're not like, this lad must be in a fight club because he can't talk about it. That's... Anyway, it teaches you a series of techniques, and they help you be in control of your stammer. And one of them that I personally find incredibly helpful is, we're encouraged to speak in a deep and breathy tone of voice like this. But I try not to because it's a bit creepy. And it can get me into a bit of trouble, okay? 13 years ago, it was my grandmother's funeral.
This is not novel, it's not original. Like, comedians do use comedy as therapy.
Because it's people telling their stories, and it's a really good, medium for people to, talk uninterrupted. Because if you try to tell that story in any other kind of medium, people will stop and ask you questions, but you know what you want to say. You can just, you know exactly how to structure, you know how to structure your own story better than anybody else, I guess, is the thing, so.
There's certainly been times that the joke has been made either about me or by me, that, if I was fixed, then I'd be boring, or if I was fixed, then I wouldn't have anything to talk about and stuff like that,
I do an awful lot of stuff about mental illness and recovery, just because I don't feel like there's a lot of chat about how weird it is. It sort of goes to please talk and then nothing else. So I just enjoy that. I enjoy kind of pushing people's boundaries a little bit.
Well, first of all, most if not all comedians, probably leaning towards all comedians, are mentally ill. I think that everybody should have a therapist and some form of therapy. I really do. Like, even if you don't feel like you're struggling or anything like that, that's fantastic. Fuck you.
But yeah, even in the most tragic circumstances, and I've had some grim times the last few years, my brain is still thinking comedically, so, which kind of helps get over tough times,
Like talking about my own experiences in ways that reflect on other people as well. So like, I'm extremely aware of the responsibility that I have as a trans comedian, as a queer comedian, and I'm talking about this community that I'm a part of and that I'm an active member of. But I'm also like, when I'm talking about myself, when I'm making jokes about being a big slut and everything, like, I would never want that to reflect badly on other people in the community who don't have the same experiences that I do.
Right? The asterisk was invented, I have written down somewhere. The asterisk was invented to, I do actually have written down because I forgot it. The asterisk was invented to denote an error. Sorry. These are just some of my notes I have about my body. The asterisk, where's it gone? The asterisk But what's going on with Jaffa Cake Donuts? That's the wrong joke. Yeah, what's going on with Asterix? I mean, seriously. I wrote this stuff down. It's not coming out just off the top of my head. An asterisk should only be used to indicate an explanatory footnote, okay? I got a text earlier from a pal, total gobbledygook, random letters and emojis. 5 minutes later, asterisk, I'm going to the cinema tonight. Do you want to come? I mean, come on. I mean, what kind of laziness is this? You know, if you can't be bothered to write your text message to me about the cinema, you know, the first time round, no amount of asterisks is going to repair our friendship. And what's going on with cocaine use nowadays? I mean, come on. What is with this? Everyone's doing cocaine. Everyone, all ages. I was at a party recently, and these kids came up to me. Little kids said, "Do you want to do some birthday bumps?" I'm like, what? Birthday bumps? They're 8 years old, these children. What's going on? Birthday bumps? Come on. I mean, is there any parents left on planet Earth? Where are all the parents? Where are the adults? I also do one-liners.
A person can make a living as a comedian in Ireland. It'll be tough. A person can. It's first of all very hard. Second of all, there's a lot of not to shit on them or anything, but like there's a lot of like you'll see the same faces on RTE. RTE don't really have. Actually, I will shit on RTE.
When I started, I think there was an awful lot of the typical kind of lad comedian around. And they're still around, and some of them very, very good and all that sort of stuff. But now there's an awful lot of other voices coming in, both in terms of the type of person that's on stage and the approach they're taking.
But I think the audiences are willing to go with it and go with the weird stuff, and I think they seem to enjoy being surprised, which there's so much of that this festival. Everything is a surprise here, you know. Yeah.
This is the thing now. I mean, the scene is big enough the comedy scene is big enough for all these different types of comedy. I think if these older guys who are still making quite, you know, controversial jokes, I think there's still spaces for them to do their comedy, you know, and they will draw their audience, and it's free speech, so they're entitled to do that. But that doesn't mean they have to impose their version of comedy on younger comedians, you know, and there is a lot of tension there between the older, different generations of comedians. But I think there's enough room for everyone to get along, you know.
Finally, a win for the straight, am I right? Yeah. Bullied an old man into the street. Yeah. No, it's nice for Felix to invite me down. The last time we were in Waterford, we were at a funeral, which was very sad, and Felix's response to our collective grief was to try to drive a small child insane. So it was like an at-home funeral, and there was like this cute little girl, and everyone loved her because she sat up next to me and was silent for 2 minutes, and then went, "Do you want to know what your celebrity lookalike is? It's Bob Ross." Yeah, she was really cool, everyone thought. And then, like all sweet little girls, she toddled off to bed. And then Felix was sitting next to me, and he turned to me and he was like, "Oh, that's so weird." He showed me a picture of him when he was young, and he was like, "The spit of this little girl." And he was like, "I think I should tell her." I was like, "Please don't. She's gone to bed." And he insisted, so we went downstairs. We were leaving at this stage, getting our coats from the room she was asleep in. And Felix, like, shook her away. And you have to remember that this little girl was in a dream, asleep, and then a little man woke her up and showed her a photo, and he said, "I used to look like you when I was a little girl." So it was a successful funeral. Yeah. That's 100. There's like 5% of that's embellished. That's remarkably true.
We've had our first comedy festival in Waterford, the Foolhardy Comedy Festival, and hopefully it's just the beginning of an open-ended, like a multi-year festival like the Kilkenny Cat Laughs. You know, I mean, the Kilkenny Cat Laughs started off in one pub 30 years ago or more, you know, with a couple of comedians. And it grew into this international renowned festival, probably the 4th or 5th biggest comedy festival in the world.
With this festival, a big point of it that we want to have was to show people the accessibility into comedy, because it is such an accessible art form. You just need yourself and your perspective and just bang a couple of jokes in between it, do you know?
We were here last night and it had such a wonderful, wonderful energy to it. Like the kind of space available in Waterford is so interesting. It's not in theatres, it's in like escape rooms, it's outside, it's in, you know, an art gallery. So there's like more interesting spaces to use which create a different feel around it. There's like people kind of coming in and just coming across it. It's not as planned or as organized or ticketed, you know, so that adds to it as well, because you get people just like coming into it for the first time or exploring it or trying it out, you know, which I think is a great thing for a festival to bring people into an art form or expose them to something that they wouldn't be seeing anyway, or otherwise even.
I just thought it was a great idea. It's great to see something. It's great. I always love it when something like this, you know, comes up, you know, especially somebody doing a kind of a festival where there's different things as well as comedy there, you know what I mean? I think it's a great idea. And at the reception, the opening reception yesterday, when Connor said that like he's fully aware that, and I've already mentioned the Cat Laughs, that there's a big festival just up the road, but this is not in competition with him. This is something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, there is niche elements of this first festival anyway. Who knows how it's going to grow in the future? But absolutely, you know, I think there can be but I think it can also grow into a more conventional festival as well. You can have niche elements, but I think there is space there for, you know, some of the main acts that will come down will be mainstream acts, you know. So as I said, you know, the comedy scene is evolving, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this festival will evolve with that. But one thing is for certain, the Waterford populace want to see live comedy. It's as simple as that.
Waterford has an amazing like art scene. It's a very world-class art scene, and I think compared to somewhere like Dublin or Cork, where it tends to be more, there's more money involved. Waterford, it's people making stuff because they love making stuff, and it's people's authentic sense of humor, not filtered through any kind of board or like committee or anything. It's the people who are making it, doing it, and I think that's always been the case of Waterford. I think it's really special.
Connor Nolan came to myself and Sean Murphy and said, do you want to do an April Fool's Day festival? And we said, Sean specifically said next year. Yeah, right. But we put it together in 3.5 weeks. So it was a lot of work, but very, very rewarding at the end. It was great to bring comedy back to Waterford. I know there's a huge appetite for it in the town, but, you know, I had to move to Dublin to get gigs. You know, there wasn't much of a scene, and it was really wonderful to be able to bring that back, and also to show people that, yes, this is wanted. If you support that, if you nurture that, there's an appetite for it. It's valuable, and again, it gets people out. We all need a laugh right now. Not sure if you noticed, it's been a bit tough for everyone lately. So yeah, really delighted to be involved, to be such part of such an amazing team.
Stop. Do you think? Fuck! What was the question?
But yeah, no, I started realizing that I kind of hated kids after a friend of mine had kids. So we were friends in college, and we were the party people. Do we have any guards in here?
No, man. Yeah, no, I never go with a high five when I'm like, yeah, because there's too many, like, there's a couple of ways you can mess up a high five. You can hit them way too hard, and they're like, oh no! Or you can just be like a non-slap, and that's the worst. So I'm like, I've started doing like fist bumps.
Me and Keane sharing a bed, and he made me top and tail so it wouldn't seem gay. Which I think is fucked up and homophobic. Not to call you out or anything.
A cheat at chasing an antelope. Girls say there's a fast chasing a fast. Do you know what I mean? Come on, people, wake up. It's not fair on the poor slop. Oh, what's going on with shampoo? Come on, seriously. I mean shampoo. Is that the best name for a hair thingamajig? You want me to put poo in my hair, and it's not even real poo. It's shampoo. You want me to put fake poo in my hair, fake shit in my hair? What's going on?
I think all artists can make a living in Ireland. It's about changing the perspective of the way that artists are paid, and in terms of how venues work with, like when you look at what goes on, everything happens in the weekend in the back room of the pub. Do you know what I mean? Why isn't there a show of a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock that people can go to after work? Do you know what I mean? And there's not alcohol at it. People are just having water, or coffee, or whatever. There's this whole kind of ideology tied into kind of like a drinking culture within Ireland that everything only happens because there's alcohol there. But if we can kind of try and change the perspective on that, open up venues to kind of the ideas that, something can happen on a Wednesday evening. Everyone doesn't have to be drunk to enjoy themselves. They can just come to a show and enjoy themselves. I think then you'll see there's more work coming out of it. The development of shows will be better, and then, the money comes rolling in.
The Foolhardy Festival is going to become a huge success. It already is a huge success.